Evening, I'm still here in sunny Florida, as you can probably see. And yes, after the show yesterday, I did go to Mar-a-Lago to meet Donald Trump. What's Mar-a-Lago like? It's like a palace. It is the most extraordinary premises, the most beautiful place. Materials were imported from all over the world to build it. It was originally thought that it could be the Winter White House for a US president. And in the end, of course, that is what it turned out to be. It's an incredible place. And just to think that New York court valued it at $18 million when probably it would sell in 24 hours for $500 million or perhaps substantially more, tells you a lot about what is going on here in America. The judicial system is being used against Trump in the most extraordinary way. That judgment last week said he borrowed money from banks to launch new projects, and he borrowed the money on the basis that he'd inflated the prices of his properties. And even though the banks got paid back all of their money with interest, somehow, a prosecutor gets in the middle of that and fines him $350 million. Oh, by the way, they've now backdated that to the time when the so-called offence took place and increased the fine to $450 million. And that's all ahead of the next trial that starts on the 25th of March. There is this endless process to try and put Trump out of the game, to try and put Trump out of the race. And I have to say, I really do believe, just look and think about that New York court judgment to realise just how corrupted and politicised the judicial system in America is. And yet, despite that, he is on rare form. He gave 10 major speeches last week, and a Trump speech is at least an hour and a half, often 2 hours. He has the resilience unlike anything I've seen in any other human being. He's optimistic, he's bullish, the polls are definitely going in his direction. He showed a huge amount of interest in UK politics, and we talked at length about Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, obviously we talked about Sir Keir Starmer, and you'll learn more about that over the course of the next few weeks. And I'll tell you what is for certain, he's not a fan of Prince Harry. I wonder what will happen if he's president. I wonder whether there'll be someone having a real look into how Harry got a US visa, given that he's admitted repeatedly taking illegal drugs. And yes, I got given a new version of the Trump hat signed by him. Now, let's get back to the United Kingdom, where it seems anything Conservative members of Parliament say is taken to be divisive, taken to be Islamophobic, taken to be bad. No longer do we talk about the intimidation of members of Parliament. No longer do we talk about some of the appalling scenes we see on the streets of our city. No, we're just focused on what Tory MPs say. In this case, it's London MP, Conservative MP Paul Scully, who had this to say on Radio London yesterday.
You're right. If you were just looking about the neighbourhood comment, if you're just looking at colour of skin, so, for example, when a number of Indians were coming in the 70s, and my father's half Burmese, so I've seen it firsthand. And if it's about the colour of skin, that's one thing. You do see the point I'm trying to make is if you look at parts of Tower Hamlets, for example, where there are no-go areas, parts of Birmingham, Sparkhill, but where there are no-go areas, mainly because of doctrine and mainly because of people sort of abusing in many ways their religion because it's not the doctrine of Islam to espouse what some of these people are saying. That, I think, is the concern that needs to be addressed.
Well, I know all about this subject because in 2015 I said there were cities in France, particularly parts of Paris and Marseille, that were effectively no-go zones. What is a no-go zone? Well, it's somewhere where the police themselves are afraid to go, somewhere you would not want to walk late at night, and perhaps, when we come to cultural and religious issues, somewhere where perhaps a couple of gay guys holding hands would receive a torrent of abuse, or a woman out on a Saturday night, perhaps not wearing that many clothes, would expect to receive some abuse. It's difficult to define exactly what a no-go zone is, and crime, gang violence, religion are all contributors. There are multiple reasons why there are very, very bad areas in our cities. In the case of Tower Hamlets, it is worth remembering that it is one of the top 10 crime boroughs in the whole of the country. So I don't think that what Paul Scully said was wholly unreasonable. But of course, the usual outcry. How dare he say such a thing? And unlike Lee Anderson, of whom we'll hear a bit more in just a moment, unlike Lee Anderson, Paul Scully decided to come on GB News today to clarify his position.
Because, I want to have those substantial discussions, and if there are people that are, triggered and upset and offended by it, and there are other people that are agitating politically for political reasons and those kind of things, but the substantial people that are offended by it, let's rally back from that and get on to the substantive debate. What Lee is doing is perpetuating this populist approach, because by calling Sadiq Khan, selling London to his mates, I think there was a clear dog whistle there that actually there's loads of things I can throw at Sadiq Khan. There's a big shopping list. Having mates that are Islamists and selling London to them or giving London over to them.
So there's Paul Scully retracting and now aiming his fire at Lee Anderson. The Conservatives are literally tearing themselves to pieces on this. Well, GB News' Adam Cherry went to Tower Hamlets today, albeit during daytime, to ask people whether they thought there were no-go zones.
Yesterday, Conservative MP Paul Scully said there are certain areas of Tower Hamlets that are no-go areas. Do you agree with him?
I definitely agree that in certain aspects of London it's a bit, rough. I wouldn't totally agree with it because that's it's a bit racist, to be quite honest. Everywhere you have little pockets rough areas, isn't it?
I don't notice any no-go areas around here. I'm quite happy to walk around here. Like any areas, you've got to be careful where you go, I suppose, but that's the same in all areas of London.
These things should be said if they're a reality. There are areas of London that are no-go zones.
I think he's wrong.
How so?
I think there's a great community here. I think that you can't judge an area by how much opportunity people are given. And I think that, it's like fear-mongering from a politician who doesn't know the area. Depends what you define as a no-go area. Tower Hamlets has been somewhere I've gone every day, so I wouldn't call it a no-go area. They're quite safe.
So today, Scully has slightly rode back on his words. What would you say to him if you could speak to him today? Imagine he's standing right here.
I'd like him to come down and, we could go for a curry at Face the Mishti, see how.
Well, as I say, the absolute definition of what is a no-go zone is tricky, it's difficult. But there are certainly places I would not want to go, certainly after dark, and I wonder whether that's how you feel too. Give me your thoughts on no-go zones. Do they really exist in our country? Farage at GBNews.com. Well, I'm joined now by Mark Bracewell, former gang member and managing director of the children's mentoring company Blinded Faith, and I'm also joined by Heather Binning, founder of the Women's Rights Network. Mark Bracewell, you were part of a gang, you were involved in drugs and violence from a very, very early age. From your experience and what you've been through, and I know you've lost the sight of one eye as a result of a knife attack, do you think that the drugs gangs, the battles we see between them, have they made parts of our cities no-go zones?
I wouldn't go as far as to say there's no-go zones, because like you say, there's people that do go into them areas. Obviously, people that are not from them sort of areas tend to have a lot more fear. They feel a lot more fear about going into them areas. But there are areas within our country that are not as safe as others. And yes, people obviously who are in gangs and gang violence and things like that do make it a lot not as safe as other areas.
I mean, Mark, you've turned your life around, and congratulations to you. Yeah. You've done that. That's a big achievement. But in your view, is the gang situation in our cities worse than it was when you were involved in this, or is it any better?
I think there's a lot more youngsters getting involved in it, and yes, it's now the youngsters that are involved in it are scared for themselves, and that's why you have got a rise in knife crime and things like that. And obviously they're carrying knives to protect themselves, and that is what's obviously attributing to the violent crimes within these areas.
Yeah, I mean, the argument I've heard myself from teenagers in the London area, the argument I've heard is they now carry knives for protection, because they're worried that the bad guys have got knives, and this just spirals and spirals and spirals. I mean, a thought or two from you. Do we need stop and search? Do we need metal detectors? What can we do to reduce the number of people actually carrying knives and causing hideous harm, such as you've suffered?
I keep on saying it starts at home. It starts within the home. We need to be giving the parents the skills to obviously teaching their children of the correct way that they need to be handling themselves when they are out on the streets and when they are coming into contact with other people. We have to police the children ourselves inside the home before they go out on the streets. And yes, the police do have a big part to play, and stop and search it is going to make a difference. It's just the way that the stop and searches are done that people have a problem with.
That causes the argument. No, I know. Heather from the Women's Rights Network. I mean, there are certainly, aren't there? There certainly must be for women, particularly if they're on their own, quite a lot of parts of our cities where, late evening into the night, women would feel extremely uncomfortable.
Well, we all make risk assessments every moment of the day. You said yourself, Nigel, that there's some places that you might reconsider going to. This is a fundamental part of the everyday life of women, making that risk assessment of where they go, when they go, if they're on their own, are they out at night time, who might be, you listen out. There's a checklist for women. You listen out for footsteps behind you. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be in Bayswater, you could be in Lewisham, you could be in Birmingham, anywhere. These things are a part of the everyday life for women. And, this is, but I feel it's political point scoring to narrow it down and focus on a couple of areas that might have high crime for any number of reasons. A woman is killed in this country by a man every 3 days. Sorry, I lost you.
I understand that. Violence against women, I fully understand. But the other point I wanted to make is how women are dressed, how they appear in some parts of our cities. Is that becoming an issue? And I say that because I went into Molenbeek, a district of Brussels, not very far away from the city centre. And I went there with an assistant that worked for me at the time in the European Parliament, hair colour very much the same as yours. And within a minute of getting out of the car, she was told she needed to cover up. Are there cultural issues now becoming an issue, and maybe in Tower Hamlets or Spark Hill, about the way that women actually appear?
I don't think there are particularly, but you would have to say in that regard, the problem is the problem of it's a male problem. It's not how we look or we dress or we have a hijab on or a short skirt on. That's not the issue. The issue is it's male violence. It's addressing the cause of it. I'll give you an example. There was an article in the Times last week about the spiking of drinks, but nowhere in that article said this was a male crime. And unless we can address that as the problem, then we can't solve it. This argument does bring me back to the days of the Yorkshire Ripper, when women are told not to put themselves in danger. Not that the men weren't told stop attacking women. It's the women that we are told that we have to take care. I just want to pick up on the Birmingham element. We've got groups all over the country, and the Birmingham group reports that in this area, Spark Hill, there are some lovely family restaurants. There's cafes and bars. It's a very nice area to be. They don't feel threatened there at all. In fact, in some cases less, because the restaurants aren't selling alcohol. They say this is not the same issues on the street. One woman worked at a primary school there and said the kids were fantastic. There were no issues. So, I think there's a problem in putting wood on the fire of this, which is unrealistic. There's a fundamental problem. Men are violent.
All right.
Women are the victims, predominantly.
OK, not all men. Let's be very, very clear. Not all men. Heather, thank you.
I did say predominantly,
for your
Nigel.
Contributions.
Predominantly.
I know. Thank you. Well, that's a debate we're going to hear a lot more of, I suspect, over the course of the coming years.